Hey everyone, welcome to our live movie review for Godzilla Minus One, which released in theaters in December, or in the US in December, and will hit streaming soon. Joining me today is award-winning science fiction and fantasy artist Bob Eggleton, who is also a longtime fan of Godzilla and a longtime artist as well. And he's done some work with Godzilla.
Hi there.
Welcome, Bob.
Hi there. Good to be here.
Great. And here's a piece of Bob's art, which I absolutely love and wanted to make sure you all got a chance to see before we kind of dive into things. So Godzilla Minus One features a young kamikaze pilot in a post-war Japan that is being ravaged by this fearsome new creature that locals call Godzilla. There will be spoilers in this review, so just be prepared. And I think kind of in a way that's probably why some of you are here, because you just want to talk about the film and you want to hear about the film as well. So as Bob and I chat, be sure to add some questions into the chat if you have any, and we will be sure to get to them as we go. So Bob, thanks for coming. And hey, why don't you kind of kick things off by sharing with people a little bit about yourself and you know, your familiarity with Godzilla.
Well, yeah, sure. I have been a Godzilla fan since 1966. My mother got me this thing called the Godzilla game. It was by Ideal Toys, and it was a board game. It was 69 cents. I mean, I love little cheap things. It was great, and I just fell in love with it. I said, I got to find this beast. And so I went to see the movies a lot in the 1970s when they ran them as matinees at the local mom and pop things like King Kong versus Godzilla, Godzilla versus the Thing, and Monster Zero, and all that kind of stuff. They had all those, and really, I was kind of, really into Godzilla from the beginning. And then as time moved along, he came back in 1984, and we got all excited about him again. And then I started getting into some artwork for him in the 1990s after, I've been very busy in science fiction artwork and science fiction illustrations and stuff like that. But I always saw Godzilla as kind of part of that whole thing, because it's science fiction, and he's a result of an atomic mutation. And his iteration, his versions of him through the years have kept him alive. I mean, he is apparently the most franchised film character now, straightly now. Guinness Book of World Records apparently has confirmed that with the new movie. And he's changed so much. He went from terrifying monster to kind of like a superhero to something else, to being this terrifying creature again. And then he became the defender of Earth again. And even though he didn't like us, he defended us. And then, the whole Legendary series came along, which just brought Godzilla into the mainstream, and we're looking at Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire, coming out in a few weeks, and that's getting some good buzz. But they really did a marvelous job with Godzilla Minus One, because it is probably the second best Godzilla film I've ever seen, and let's put the first one up as the top one. Okay, so everybody can agree on that.
I'll have to agree with you on that one as well. So, given the long history of Godzilla and the various iterations of Godzilla over the years, what do you think Godzilla Minus One is really about when you get down to it? It's not just about post-war Japan recovery. What do you think? What is it really about this film?
I think it's about the people. I think it's about, there is the post-war thing, there is the recovery, but it's a people movie. And somebody reviewed it and said you could take Godzilla out of it and still have a beautiful post-war World War II movie. And that's pretty special. I mean, and we fell in love with the characters. That was what was really nice. The human characters in it, which typically take a side seat to the monsters in the other Godzilla movies we've seen. These ones really were, you love them, you felt for them, you cry for them at one point, because you understand what they're dealing with. They're dealing with a completely obliterated nation that's been defeated, conquered, defeated, whatever. And now this thing comes along and it's just going to it's going to be even more of a terror again. And yeah, and I think it's a statement. There's a statement on human strengths and how people, want to they want to prevail. They want to prevail. They want to do something right. There's a beautiful scene in the movie where Doc is Noda. He's stating to everybody, here's how we're going to defeat Godzilla, and he talks about how for far too long this nation has treated life cheaply. It has cheated life, and he brought up the whole kamikaze thing. He said it's been cheap. Now we are going to defend. We're going to defend things, and it's a wonderful scene. It's a scene that stands out in my mind even more than the monster scenes. And you felt like you saying, this actor is absolutely fabulous, and I think the whole cast worked really well together, and they had a terrific chemistry, and they were wonderful to watch them acting was a wonderful thing, and they're totally likable. Everyone, you liked them.
Yeah, I agree. The cast was a superb choice across the board. All of the characters were really compelling. I loved how the film really started out with the kamikaze pilot landing on the small Japanese island, and you get this quiet time with him and getting to know him as a person, and some of the fears and some of the anxieties that he has, and then how his comrades on the island kind of react to him landing there and being there when he really shouldn't be.
Right, and he was making a state. He realized that they were on the end of the war. It was the end of the war. Yeah. They knew one life, one attack is not going to make anything a difference. No. And so he literally started realizing the value of life. So he kind of invented, my plane developed a problem. And then he lands there and Tachibana goes, we can't find a problem with your plane. And they sort of get a little bit of suspicion starts. And then at the same time, that's when the Godzillasaurus shows up, and he's the pre-mutated monster that you see. And he's kind of a seagoing, kind of a T-Rexy kind of thing with these giant spikes. And then, of course, he obliterates the entire garrison. He just obliterates the entire encampment, except for two guys, except for Koichi and for Tachibana. And then, Tachibana's always held it against him that he could have, that he could have done something. He didn't, because it was, he didn't get to his plane enough to shoot at the Godzillasaurus. And so he was paralyzed, absolutely paralyzed with fear when this thing came down. And that plays out later in the film. And it's sort of a tale of a little bit of survivor guilt, along with, a guy that's kind of like realizes he just doesn't want to be part of this anymore. And that's brought up several times. Once when he's on the boat later on, and there's one kid on the boat goes, I wish the war had gone on longer, and he grabs him and says, no, you don't. Like that.
No.
And that these are powerful things they were saying. And it's really interesting how that played in Japan too. But it struck me, and that's the stuff I remember. I mean, I love the Godzilla sequences and their stunning visual effects, but I think that the human stuff, the interaction with the people, really struck me as something that was just incredible, actually.
Yeah, I think the human element in this film put it definitely above a lot of the past versions of Godzilla. The human element, I mean, you really cared about every character in this film. Whoever they were, they all felt like real and interesting and important people, even though and because I think it was the tale of the small lives in Japan, just the regular people like you and me. And they told it in such a great way, and really illustrated the loss that the nation and the people and the families all shouldered at that moment.
You saw that entire field of that just wrecked homes, just destroyed rats who were camping out with what they could find. And of course he gets given little Akiko. and now he's kind of going to have to raise her. And I thought she, her name is Sei Nakatani, and she, I think she really stole the show. A 2-year-old actor, and she stole the show, and she was just like, and
it's adorable, adorable.
Yeah, and it was just, it was beautiful. And what I thought was so great about it was that he assumed the role of a father, and of course, like, he wanted the family life, and he wasn't. And there's that sequence where he's with his crew, and they're going, "This is not your daughter. This is not your wife." Right. Oh, okay, like that. It's this stopping, this kind of like stop the dinner moment. You know what I mean? Like when they realize that's not, and he's trying to trade. It's complicated. I'm trying to explain to you what's going on, and I want the best for these people because I love them, and that's what made it such a human picture. And you know, some parts of it, I literally, I was getting moist-eyed watching it. It was just that good. And
there were moments where you're really thinking to yourself, you know what? Like, usually you love seeing just the destruction that he wreaks. You love seeing, like, oh my God, he just took out a building. He just took out a tower. He just took out all these people and all these things. He just took that out. But in this version, you're like, don't take out the people that I care about, because I really care about them. This destruction is one thing, but don't hurt the people we love. And I think that's really different from most of the Godzilla movies that we've seen.
This is also, there's something else too, is that when he unleashes his atomic heat, they don't call it atomic breath. It's the whole pantheon calls it now. Their official light is called the heat ray. They don't call it the heat ray. But what he did was his scales, his fins sort of all, you can see this on the toy here, his fins pop up as he's about to release his atomic breath. And what it's relating to is it's the pins being pulled out of an atomic pile. It's a safety. And so he releases this massive amount of energy, and it creates a mini atomic explosion. And then there's a sequence, that sequence where he releases it, and there's an absolute blast wave, and it's carnage. It's just carnage and people dying on a mass scale. And what really hits you is when he roars. He looks up and he roars. You almost think, if the creature had intelligence, it's lording, it's celebrating the carnage it's creating. And that is what made the horror of this thing so absolutely real, is that this is a different Godzilla. This is we've seen the Godzilla that saves us, and the Godzilla that shakes hands with Jet Jaguar in 1973, and we've seen the superhero, the kind of the more hero Godzilla that has come out in the recent Legendary Pictures movies. And that's all iteration. It's all how it's envisioned. It's all directors envisioning things. Shin Godzilla back in 2016, that was yet another type of movie where something else was. They were just sort of the writers and directors of that were just sort of doing a one-off and doing their own vision of what their idea of a Godzilla would be. And now we have Yamazaki's vision of what a Godzilla is, and he actually started this in a movie called Always, and it's one of his earlier movies, and there's a sequence in it, 1940 sequence in it, where we see the very first CGI Godzilla completely wipe out an area of Tokyo, and the effect, it's not as detailed and all that, but it's his thing. And I guess it had been in the back of his mind that he was planning this all the way along. And so, Miyazaki had directed a movie called The Returner, which is a fun little time travel movie, if you've never caught that. It's like the Terminator meets Independence Day. But it's a lot of fun. And then another one called Space Battleship Yamato in 2012, and that's a lot of fun too. But Yamazaki's he's a really good director. He's a terrific director.
Really talented.
And he did this for, some say, $10 million, not the 15 that they're saying, but they're saying it's around 10 to 12. And it's all because he did tight storyboarding, tight shots. He knew the up top money was not going to be spent on it like you see these Marvel Comics movies, where the up top money just goes to stuff they don't even need, and including producers and stuff like that who just sign off on things and get several $1 million for doing so. That doesn't happen in Japanese movies.
what's amazing about what he was able to do with this film is the production value when you're looking at a lot of those effects.
Yeah,
I
right,
mean,
exactly.
yeah, you could tell like there was some, you could tell how they were doing things a bit, but even in the newest, fanciest, shiniest superhero movie, you still see like that awkward CGI moment. But in this movie, in Godzilla Minus One, the work that they did on the effects
Yeah,
almost added to the experience because it made it that much more tangible and that much more tactile, like gritty. You could feel the difference in it, and it was just really powerful.
right.
And I can't believe they made it for what they actually did. The amount of money they spent is phenomenal.
Yamazaki wanted to contrast. The first movie happens primarily at night in a lot of scenes. He wanted to contrast that by making this film primarily in the day. And that's why you see Godzilla a lot of time, and that's a lot of the fans like that because a lot of the movies don't do that. They show him a lot of times at night,
Yeah.
and that's just done for in CG talk. It's done because it's actually easier to do. But this time they actually took the time to do him in the day, and I mean the part where his tail takes out that building, and then he
Wow.
walks by it, his foot kicks the whole thing out, and those TV crews on top, and they just fall, and you're falling with them.
Yeah.
It's an incredible sequence, and it happens. I mean, it's incredible. And this thing is just wild, and it is like on
So,
loose, and it is enjoying its carnage it's doing.
yeah, I mean, you just look at its face and you really do get the sense of it. It's really, really well done.
I,
One of the things that, when we were chatting before we actually went live, we were chatting a bit, having fun. We were also talking about the history. Like one thing that they put into this film, which is really well done, is the like actual historical moments, actual historical footage from the time around, post World War II. And they actually put that into the movie, and it gives it that much more, I guess the word is
yeah,
authenticity, and grounds it so much.
editing in it that is so good because two things happen. One, we see how Koichi and his adopted family are progressing, and he's getting money coming in, so now he has a motorcycle, and now the house is getting better, and you hear that there's a beautiful bit of music by Naoki Sato in it, and it's just a very nice little guitar riff kind of thing, and then it's contrasted right after that with the bikini explosion of the hydrogen bomb going off, and then you see, you hear the roar, and you see that eye thing, and it's Godzilla is born. And the other thing is when they do the microfilm bit, they go secret, it's U.S. secret microfilm, and they say General Douglas MacArthur regrets not being able to help the Japanese with this problem because of the Soviet. That was real. That was actually, Godzilla was not involved, but that's why the U.S. kind of pulled away from Japan very quickly because of its proximity to the Soviet Union, and they had just exploded 2 atomic bombs there. And so now the Cold War was heating up in reality. So they just dialed Godzilla into it. So, and then they dial into it like that an American submarine had photographed and tracked and photographed the monster and was destroyed in the process. And I thought that was so well done as like a newsreel. And they just did a fabulous job of it. And it shows you geopolitical, and basically it was the U.S. throwing Japan under the bus, and they were saying like, go out, you guys got to defend yourselves. They had no ships. They really didn't have much of anything to defend, so they had these little boats, these little kind of wooden boats, and they were told go out and just blow up the mines, destroy the mines. The reality was they were prepping them to defend against this creature that was getting closer and closer to Japan. And as the captain sits there and he says, this country's always been, they send us out to do it. You know what I mean? And that's very powerful. And they were indeed political statements, but it was done so tactfully and tastefully that it used history. It used real history to tell it. And that was absolutely remarkable.
Yeah. And one of the things that I loved talking about is how art is always in conversation with other art. Film is also whether people think about it or not, in conversation with other films and other social movements of the time or things that are happening. And I loved how you just spoke about how, you know, the bomb was just exploded and now they were the US was turning to Russia in that moment and not able to help Japan out like they should
Right.
have.
Right.
And also then we just saw the movie Oppenheimer come out recently.
Yep.
And so in a way, these two movies are in this weird dialogue together, because we saw Oppenheimer from a distance and then we see the bomb from a distance in that movie. And then suddenly we see Godzilla Minus One coming out right after Oppenheimer, where we see the impact of the bomb in this film that is all in Japanese. And frankly, even though it's got captions and it's all in Japanese, I couldn't understand a word of what was being said, but I didn't need to. I understood that movie from the first frame to the last, because of the storytelling was so tight and so on the money that everything I saw on screen made absolute sense.
The thing that was with the subtitling was that they anglified it so that it would be like, you know, he might be saying they were squashed like bugs or whatever, and that's something we would say, okay. But in Japan, it's the sentence structure a little bit different, a little bit differently worded, and so it has to be anglified so that people can get it and understand it, and you do understand it, and it's you know, I mean, the Oppenheimer connection, a lot of the fans say if we didn't have Robert J. Oppenheimer, we wouldn't have Godzilla. And really, that was I mean, Christopher Nolan loved the film too. He did Oppenheimer, and that both of them dovetail into each other in the same year, coincidentally, which was really something else. And it really was true what was going on, what's suggested in Oppenheimer too, and that is that they invented the bomb to drop on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. They did that to show the Russians. There's a theory that it was not just to end the war, it was to show the Russians, and this was already going way before that ended, because that was going to end anyway. And so, and in doing so, was you know, they created Godzilla with all these atomic tests, and you know, he mutates into this dinosaur mutates into this massive armor plated thing that just feeds on radiation. It just feeds on it, and you know, as is suggested by the end, that he's not going away.
No, that's one of the things that I loved, was the end is they tried over and over to kill him. And I just kept thinking to myself, oh my God, it seems like every time they try to kill him and he powers up and does his atomic thing, he actually seems to grow in size.
Right.
And at the end, I felt like, I don't think he's dead. Like, I don't think they got him. Maybe they bought themselves a couple of years. So I'm personally hoping that there's a Godzilla Minus One Part 2 or whatever they would call it.
Yeah, apparently there's conflicting information on that. Yamazaki's talking about it, but at the same time, there's also the theory that prevails that let's see what another director would do in his own original vision of Godzilla, because they seem to do very well with these like not connected movies, like Shin Godzilla, not connected at all with Minus One. They do a lot better with them. In the early 2000s, they had let's see, Godzilla Millennium. They had Godzilla 2000, Godzilla Millennium, Godzilla against Megaguirus, and GMK, Godzilla Mothra, King Ghidorah, All Out Monsters Attack. All three were done by different directors and they wanted to do like kind of different takes on things, and the only commonality was with the events of 1954.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then we went and we had a two-parter, and then, you know, they were finding that having the kind of the lineage, there was a story arc going on in the 90s Godzilla movies, and it was a little bit it varied, a little bit hard to keep up with. So the idea is, let's just see what happens when we do Godzilla as a concept envisioned by different younger new directors. And I've always said this: if you put 4 artists in a room and say, you put boards all between us all so we can't see each other. And you say, draw Godzilla. He's got to have 3 rows of spikes. He's got to have, a dinosaur look, and he's got to have his atomic breath. That's the Toho mandate. That's what they want. And if you did that, we'd all come up with different Godzillas. Every single one of us would come up with different Godzillas. And that's an asset because he's changed so much. That's why here we are 70 years later, and he's still big.
Yeah.
Bigger than he's ever been, actually.
I love that you mentioned that Godzilla is a concept, because it really does seem like in all of the different Godzilla movies that we've seen, including Godzilla Minus One, Godzilla really, in a way, it's kind of like how the superhero movies take on the time. They are supposed to embody the time. The heroes are supposed to embody the heroes that we need today, whatever today needs. And Godzilla is almost like, in this film, the monster that embodies the time. In the past, he's been different things.
Yeah.
But this is the mindless, warlike Godzilla. I mean, he's upset, not mindless. That's maybe not the right way to put it.
Right.
But he doesn't make sense to us. He's simply terrifying. Yeah,
he's just terrifying. You to go back to like the 1970s example, Godzilla versus Megalon. It's kind of some of the fans look at it kind of in a weird way, but it is a product of its time because it has a superhero in it called Jet Jaguar. Because right at the time, 1973, TV and superheroes were huge in Japan. And so they said, okay, well, what can we do? And we're going to make this creature. And then they died. Then eventually they had a hero called Jet Jaguar. And they realized as they got to about filming it, he wasn't going to carry the movie. So Shinichi Sakazawa was hired to write Godzilla into the script. And we have Godzilla versus Megalon where he shakes his hand and then he flies and he's kind of got this goofy puppy dog look and things like that. And it's a product of its time. It's all it is a product of its time. And this is what we have now. We have Godzilla. What we're seeing now is Godzilla as a product of his time. And it's just, it's just, he's going to keep on going. I mean, it's just that because he's changed so much, he's just going to keep on going.
Yeah.
And this movie is tremendous. I mean, it is, I saw it 7 or 8 times. I think 7 times in the theater.
I'm definitely going to be seeing it again as soon as it's on streaming. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's apparently they're in talks, and I can't say who, but I've been hearing they're in talks to release it on a quite good physical disc.
That would be amazing because I would give my money to support this because it's such a good film. And we only have a couple minutes left. And one of the things I always like to do toward the end of a review is actually give my recommendation of, what I think people will like about it or who I think would be a good audience for a film. I think we've already made it really clear that we both love this film.
Yep.
So I highly recommend this film to anyone. And I think that if you're uncomfortable listening to a film in another language and trying to keep up with the captions or trying to keep up with the story, I don't think you have to worry about that. And I don't think that, whether you're older or younger, I think you're going to be fine with this film. Maybe little kids might get a little scared, but I think otherwise, I think this is strangely, a great family film because you really do care about the characters and the story is very, very strong. So Bob, if you had to pick, what were some of your favorite, before we sign off, what were some of your favorite moments of the film that you'd like to kind of leave people with?
Boy. The human bits were like when he realizes when they're all he's with the crew of his ship and they're all eating and they say, wait, she's not her mommy and you're not daddy and you guys aren't married like that. Everything just stops. They go, and they're looking and they're going like that because that was a big bugaboo. You know what I mean? And
right.
And there's other things that were where Doc Noda literally says, this time we're going to do some good, and this time we're going to this country's treated life far too cheaply. And that's why the hats come off when Godzilla dies in certain films in Japanese movies, or he's in 95 it happened, because as destructive as he is, they have this reverence for life, and it's viewed entirely differently, and it's a nice view of Japanese life. The whole movie is, and of course when Godzilla appears, when they say a giant creature has come ashore. And you hear dun 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 dun, the Fukubi theme, you know, you're really brought home. It's really brought home, and then this thing just goes on an absolute rampage. And the train, when the whole car lands down in the front, you know, in front of the other thing, and the train's got to stop, and he picks it up with his mouth, and I mean, just you know, it's just this cascading action sequence. And you're left thinking to yourself, I've never seen anything like that in recent years, and something. And you see people just getting stomped on. It was just like, and you're not, and it's just this. It's this terrifying monster. It's this absolutely terrifying monster. And so, and just the whole camaraderie where they all decide, you know, we're going to do something about this problem. And you know, the science in it was all correct. The Freon gas, where they strap Freon around him and sink him to the bottom, and then they have to go to plan B, and then, you know, I mean, all of that was so well thought out. And the only thing that I will say is that in the Shinzen Fighter, apparently another friend of mine pointed out that they didn't have ejection seats in that time, and so, you know, there's a sequence where they put an ejection seat in it, and that's a spoiler. I hope you didn't, but they didn't have that at that time, so that's a very big plot point. And it's a interesting take on characters and their kind of reverence of life is what it is, and it's beautiful.
I do love how they kind of bring it full circle. They start out with the kamikaze, and then they end with like finding a way to save his life. Right. And I thought that was a really beautiful full circle that really brought home the fact that not only did the filmmakers care about these characters, but we cared about them, and they found a way to pull that together. And I really deeply appreciated that.
Yeah.
So
this film, it's the film that I could recommend to people that don't even go to see Godzilla movies. And that's the, you know, everybody's saying, was it Godzilla Minus One? I was like, oh yeah. It's like, well, you know, no, it's something everybody can see. And and when you come away and you really have an understanding, not just of that kind of movie, Godzilla, but you also have an understanding of of Japanese culture. You really do.
Absolutely. Very good. Highly recommend it. So we are at the end of our time. Thank you so much, Bob. It is always so much fun to talk with you. So I'm delighted that we had this opportunity to talk about something we both really love. So thank you.
All righty.
And thanks to everybody who tuned in and who's watching it afterwards. Be sure to click subscribe and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this review and discussion on Godzilla Minus One. And I guess we'll see you again soon for some more reviews. Thanks, everybody. Sure. Bye-bye.
Cool. Well, that did well.